Welcome back to another episode of Miyazaki and Me. I'm Kyle.
And I'm inexplicably British. I'm Shane.
And this time we are joined, because it is not a Hayao Miyazaki movie, we are once again joined by a very special guest.
Hi guys, I'm Connor. I'm a friend of Kyle's from college, and I'm a huge Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli fan, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're real glad to have you.
Yep. Yeah. This is going to be exciting because, this is, as we said, this is not a Miyazaki film itself. It's a Isao Takahata film, which is why we always bring in guests for these. And I'm excited to go over this one. It's only yesterday, which was released in July of 1991. From Studio Ghibli. This is one of the last Toho productions, as Toru Hara would retire basically after this film. And
good for him. He had a long career.
Yeah, he did have a really long career. But this was actually based off a manga.
Yeah, this was based off of, I'm going to say it incorrectly, but I'm going to try, Amoidi Poro Poro, which is actually translated to Memories Come Tumbling Down. The interesting fact about this manga, it came out in 1982, which is actually the same year that the adult portion of the movie is taking place. But in the manga itself, it actually only followed the young Taiko. It did not actually get into the adult years. All of that was actually... all of the adult Taiko was written by Takahata for the movie itself.
I love that fact because I think it's fascinating. Because in the making of the film, that Miyazaki's the one who found the manga, but he couldn't find a way to adapt it, so he gave it to Takahata. Takahata also couldn't find a way, but he thought of the idea of a framing device would make it more palatable, and I think it really works because it creates a sort of nostalgia. You have a character in the film looking back on their own childhood, and it creates this sort of interesting idea of how time passes and how you look back on your childhood through different lenses.
Yep. And speaking of looking back at like the childhoods, we always go over, just to give the viewer and the viewers and listeners some context of what else was released in this year. And this was a really big year. Once again, I feel like a kind of a broken record of like we keep saying it's like, wow, this is a really big year in animation, and they kind of all are in this time period. And because this was when Beauty and the Beast was released.
Never heard of it.
This was also the second American Tail movie, Fievel Goes West. Yet another Dragon Ball Z movie, which I'm gonna stop mentioning those because they're basically released every year.
Which one is this?
Cooler's Revenge.
Cooler's Revenge. Oh, okay, that one's terrible.
No, it's a classic. What are you talking about?
That's also why I'm gonna stop mentioning them, because they keep getting worse, it seems.
I believe Cooler's Revenge is... Oh, it's the first time Cooler actually shows up, which is why it's funny. It's called Cooler's Revenge, because he's getting revenge for them taking out Frieza, his brother. But there is a later one that Cooler comes back again, and in that one, he is the T2 Liquid Terminator. Just so you know. Just a fun fact for you.
Okay. The movie Rockadoodle also came out. And probably most importantly for me... this is when they did an extended pilot for Darkwing Duck.
Let's get dangerous, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say out of those movies, Rockadoodle was the most influential in my childhood, which is weird to say with Darkwing Duck being in there. I had that on VHS, and I wore the VHS out.
Well, that's me with Beauty and the Beast. My parents always tell me it was that and Aladdin. I would just watch every single day when I was a kid. I would watch them over and over again.
Weirdly enough, we are all picking different movies, because I love Fievel Goes West. That's one of my favorite movies from my childhood. So yeah, like I said, it was a really interesting year, and like I said, we have Only Yesterday as well, which was released in Japan, And yeah, I'm really like, it was a really interesting film for sure. It ended up making almost $30 million in the box office, so it was a huge hit for Studio Ghibli, and it's very much a slice of life, and kind of we have those adult framing sequences that we talked about, but yeah, what are your guys' kind of general thoughts and kind of scenes that stood out to you as we go through the film?
This is one actually my favorite Ghibli films. I know Miyazaki's, Miyazaki, I love him, but he definitely is the more famous of the two main directors. But Isao Takahata, I think, is a phenomenal director with such films like this, but also Tale of Princess Kaguya, and even Pom-Poko, I think, is really fascinating and really fun. But this one really hits hard for me because it's a film about kind of, you're growing up and thinking back on childhood and how some dreams didn't come true, and some aspirations have changed, and how you misremember or remember differently things. So I found it really powerful, especially as I get older. It's definitely a film. I don't think it would have the same effect if you watched it when you were a kid, but if you watch it as an older person, post college, it really hits hard, I think.
Yeah, that's actually kind of interesting because I saw this originally in 2016 with a mutual friend of all of ours, Craig. We actually saw it when it was released in theaters with the English dubs, and saw it at the Uptown Theater in Minneapolis. And back then, I mean, I've always been into animes, but I hadn't really gotten into the slice of life animes yet. Like, I felt I still had the mindset that like most animes had to be fantastical in some way, and Takahata being the less fantastic. I mean, he is the one that does a full anime of a family of anthropomorphic raccoons, but he's still the less fantastical of the two main Studio Ghibli. He's more slice of life in everything he does with them, even with the talking raccoons because they're a family. But at the time, I don't think I appreciated this movie as much as I do even now. Just 4 years later, watching it again, and really picking up on a lot of the nuances that I've actually noticed in my life, being a bit older and a bit more mature, and yeah, I very much enjoy this film.
Yeah, and Connor, you actually said you had an interesting story of how you first saw this film as well.
Well, yeah, as you pointed out, it was only officially released in the United States in 2016, because back in '91, it never got a U.S. release. It's because Disney hadn't acquired the U.S. rights to the films until later in the '90s. And then when Disney did buy the Ghibli catalog, they never released it on home video even. They chose not to. They felt it was maybe too adult or too nuanced. So for a long time, it was the unseen Ghibli film, the one you couldn't get outside of Japan. But luckily, I live in Los Angeles, and there's a theater here called the Egyptian Theater, which does every year a Ghibli retrospective. They play all the Ghibli films. And when I first moved here, I found out, oh my God, they're playing Only Yesterday, as well as Ocean Waves, the other one that you couldn't get until very recently. So I went and saw it, and it definitely wasn't even a great quality. It felt like a low quality DVD they were projecting, but hey, it was a way to watch it with subtitles, and I could see it for the first time. And I was just so excited that this film that, this is back in, I don't know, 2013, 2014. So at that time, it felt like this is the only way I'll ever see it. It'll never get released. And then, of course, it does get released. But back then, it felt like this was a real secret screening that no one else knew about, that I could finally watch this movie.
That's really cool. That's a fun way to see this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, especially in context with the rest of the Ghibli stuff too. Like it as we've been going through it, it stands out, as something so different. Especially we're just coming off, the very fantastical, Kiki's Delivery Service, and then we get this, which is so much more grounded, and yeah, plays with memory a lot, like you both have said. And I actually like this was actually a quote that they said in actually the Kingdom of Dreams and Madness about Princess Kaguya, and that was that they were having all of the background animation and stuff very sparse and very kind of, almost whitish, and just when you were doing flashbacks in that film. And they kind of use that same technique in a lot of the flashbacks here. Like, instead of a bright sky, it was just kind of white and nothingness, so that you knew it was kind of this more dreamlike, or memory, style flashback.
I was actually going to bring that up too, because to me it looked more like a manga when it was doing the flashback, and I thought that was to me that was the choice of saying, like, these portions are from the manga. These are like actually things that you can go back and read, and they're kind of giving it an homage. And then when she's an adult, it's got more color, and so to me it says, like, this is the original. This is the original story that we created for this. So we have the manga and we have the movie is kind of back and forth, and I thought that was kind of cool.
And you guys watched it in English dub, right?
Yes, I was actually going to ask you, do you normally do the subtitles?
It's interesting to me because, like, I definitely, when I started watching the films, I watched the English dubs. I still appreciate those because a lot of them are very well done. Some are not so well done, but some are well done. But this one I did see first in Japanese, and then I went and watched it in English when the new dub came out. But what's fascinating for me is the fact that this is one of the few anime, or definitely one of the first, where they recorded the audio first and matched the face movements to the actual actors. So if you watch it in Japanese, the modern day sections, the older Taiko sections, all their lips perfectly match, and they have like the cheek muscles move as she would talk, because Takahata really wanted to capture realism in those modern day scenes versus the traditional style of anime in the flashback scenes. And when you watch it in Japanese, because it's so uncommon. They don't do that very often. So watching it in Japanese, you really get a sense like this is a different style. They're really going for a really realistic depiction of human faces in this movie. That's very cool.
Yeah, you can see very much in the animation that they keep the emphasis on, like, the cheekbones and, like, the dimples almost of Taiko, as she's speaking.
Yeah, that was a really cool. You could still see it in the dub version, some, like, with her smiles and everything. Like, it felt more real in the way that she looked, and it was definitely a big difference from the children as well in that sense. But I'm actually very intrigued to actually go through and turn this on in the original Japanese now and actually see the kind of difference that it actually shows.
The English dub is still good. I like Daisy Ridley and Dev Patel. They did a good job. But it's always interesting to compare, I think, to see how different actors play the same character versus the dub versus the sub.
I had a little trouble at first with this one by the fact that there's two British actors playing the two leads, and one of them is still British and the other one is not. And I don't know why they made that choice to have one British actor do an American accent, the other one keep their British accent and be the only British character in the movie. It was that just threw me off a little bit. That's why I started off the podcast by saying I'm inexplicably British.
No, I think it's it might be because they want to differentiate that she is from the city and he is from the country, because Takahata talks about in the making of that he cast actors who were from different regions of Japan, so you really felt like that in Japanese you would tell they have different accents. They have different. You can tell from where they're from based on how they speak, and that's always a problem with English dubs. Sometimes I'll watch an anime and there's a character from the country, so they'll give the English voice actors like thick Southern accents to let they're from the country, which wouldn't make sense in Japanese. But in Japan, they'd have their own accent for the country, but they want to capture that, so they give them American Southern accents, so you know the difference.
Yeah, I remember seeing that in the documentary as well, and it's like, oh yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, because you always forget, like as Western eyes to Japan, like, we always forget it's like it's a series of islands. There's the bigger island, but like there are so many different regions of Japan. And yeah, the fact that, like, we know there's differences in accents between even New York, Philadelphia, and Boston, which aren't very far apart, but there is a difference in those accents. And yeah, what did you think, like, kind of how they approach the stories with and what little types of vignettes that we saw from her childhood?
So I felt that some of them, they did a really good job of connecting the adult to the childhood story. Some of them I felt a little less connected through the over arc idea of it, but they kind of also try to explain that away in the narrative too. At one point, I think she even says like, "I don't know why I'm thinking about the fifth grade me, but I guess I am right now." So there you go. um, so there was overall it flowed well. The flashbacks weren't jarring. The first one was a little odd because there's no, other than the changing of style a bit, there's no way to know that this just jumped to a flashback. But you pick up on the fact that it is not like her child or something right away. You pick up that this is a younger version of the character you were just introduced to, pretty quickly. I think, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I think it's fascinating, how different, you'd think if it was a flashback story, there would be more correlation. You're right, in a sense, like this is like on the one hand, adult Taiko is on a farm, and she's very kind of reflective and kind and quiet. And then you have her as a child. She's so different. She's very bold and very outspoken. So it definitely is this. There's so much unspoken how much she has changed in 15 years or whatnot, or 20 years. But I love the so many details that are specific to Japan, like the fact that they get a pineapple for the first time because it's post World War II Japan, and the economy is finally recovering. So a pineapple is a new thing, and the fact that, but also there's also things that are universal. The idea that the older sister, because she's a teenager, is into the Beatles, but the fact that because she's only 10 or 11, she doesn't care about the Beatles, and that's so relatable in the sense that even if they're only a few years apart, uh, she and her sister do not get along and they don't get the same references. So on the one hand, it's such a specific movie to Japan of the 60s and 80s. On the other hand, you can still watch it and find these universal truths, like the fact that the dad is very stoic and doesn't listen to you, and the mom tries to tell you don't talk to your dad. There are these things that work no matter where you're watching it from.
Well, in the things you just said, you kind of touched on the thing about this movie that made me incredibly angry. And that is that in no world are bananas better than pineapples. I just, I
If it's your
saw that
first,
out loud. I went, you go to hell, okay?
it might be a shock if you have a pineapple for the first time after only having bananas. Maybe it may be a big shock.
Especially fresh pineapple. It's so good. That's my big opinion from this movie, is that pineapples are indeed better than bananas, and I'm upset that they would even insinuate the other way.
I'm
It's
I'm
also
I'm allergic to pineapple, so I have
ah,
no stake in this fight.
Yeah, I told you weren't gonna like my opinion, Kyle.
it's
Uh,
also that this is I love the pineapple scene because though there's a you can if you watch all of Takahata's films, there's sort of a recurring element of cutting fruit. He cuts the fruit in Where the Fireflies. He cuts fruit here, and then he cuts it again in Kaguya. And even in the making of Kaguya, he says like, I've done this because in Grave the Fireflies we didn't do it properly. It wasn't animated right. He says the details weren't there, so I keep trying to get it better. And that's so Takahata because he's always a detailed because he's not an animator. He's not unlike Miyazaki. He's not drawing it, but he's very specific about details. So I love that this movie, especially, it's just vignettes. It's all these little moments filled with details, like she leaves her shoes off. They cut into the pineapple. She can't do fractions. All these moments that are not on their own feel like nothing, but he builds them together into this very moving portrait of a life.
he ties them together in a really nice kind of introspective on where she's at now, which really helps justify the decision at the end to stop and run back and stay in the country. Spoilers. Um, And I think that the vignettes themselves actually help motivate that decision, and as they show with all the kids showing up at that end moment, which I thought that end moment was very probably the best part of the whole movie, and seeing the kids, the ghost children interacting with her, and stopping the bus and generally running around. They left the one kid off the train and they pulled him through the window. Like, it was such a fun little scene, and it was the credits, like, it was the end of the movie. I very much enjoyed it.
I especially love the music of the whole movie. The composer is Katz Hoshi, and I think it's a phenomenal score. Obviously, Joe Hisaishi is a master of most of the Miyazaki films, but Katz Hoshi, he also did Chi the Brat, which is a TV show that Takahata did before this, and I'm so glad that he brought him back because I think it's one of my favorite scores of a Ghibli film.
Yeah. I think we've pointed out the irony that Takahata is the one who brought Hisashi into Studio Ghibli and does not actually work. The two of them don't actually work together on the same film until Princess Kaguya. Like Takahata's last film.
Yeah.
I do find it interesting when we're speaking of the music that Takahata was actually the one that translated the Rose into Japanese to be sung. So at that end song with the it was actually Takahata wrote the lyrics to that for the Japanese version.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we talked about in the last episode, he has a very good ear for music, choices in his films.
Oh, very much so. I mean, did he write the song for Kiki's? Was that what it was?
No, he was the musical director.
He was the musical director for it. That's right.
He picked all the songs and then had Hisashi score it. So.
And this film is full with we have a recurring theme is the main guy likes these Hungarian folk songs, which is this great little like detail of not just he likes folk songs but also Hungarian folk songs. So once again, he's bringing in these details that feel so specific that to the characters that you never would have thought of to include.
Yeah, just a unique little bit so that they kind of flesh out into their own being rather than blend into just another character of a movie.
Yep. And since those were in the adult scenes, like you kind of all have to imagine those are mostly, Takahata decisions. And those weren't based off, I mean, probably a little bit of influence from the manga, but it was more from his perspective of like what type of music would this character listen to.
Definitely.
It was also the flashbacks were also really cool to show the way that parents worked back in the 60s in Japan, because Taiko's father especially I thought was a great character in this movie, a stoic character who wouldn't say much but was the lead of the family. And that scene where they flash back to show him slapping her, and then her discussing it afterwards of saying like he never did it again, and sometimes I wish that he had hit me more often because now I just think back to that one time where he really hit me, and it's like what was wrong with me, kind of where she put it on herself. And it's a really interesting view on the kind of ways that parents discipline their children back then, and the abuses that you would see, that sometimes the little ones of even just one time is enough to weigh on a child's mind.
Yeah, and that scene also, it almost felt like it came a little out of nowhere. Like it was, it's not like she did worse things earlier, but like, that's what, required the discipline for some reason, was coming out without shoes on. So yeah, it was interesting that, and that was the one flashback that we really got, that sees like the father figure being, you know, being physically abusive at that point. But like she said, it was the only time.
For me, even like in some ways, even harsher moment is the moment where he says, "You can't be an actor," and it's just like everyone's like, "Oh, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be awesome. You're gonna have a fun time." And he says, "No," and that's it. End of conversation. There's no changing his mind. And it is these moments of, you're right, it's about how parents raise their kids. It's what the kid carries on into their adulthood. In contrast to moments of school, like the moment where she has to sit out a recess, and everyone thinks she has on her period at that time. It's these little moments that happen, and they're only for a brief second, but they're imprinted on your mind forever.
And I really liked the reaction in the adult world where she's telling the story of where she's not able to act, and the reaction of Toshio, and how he says, he's like, no, she goes, oh, I was never going to be an actress, like I wasn't good enough, I tried later, and he goes, no, that's not the point. The point is that you wanted it, and just this one little thing made of saying no was stopped it. Like sometimes fathers do try to do what's best for you and look out for you, but it's not, that's not always the point of the of like, you're allowed to be upset by something of that sort, is essentially what I took from what he was saying. But he kind of mixed it into a message where it was also like, fathers know best too, which I thought was kind of weird, because it seemed like the point changed in the middle of what he was saying. But
Yeah, and it was really interesting. We'll kind of focus on the flashbacks before we get to the adult story. It was interesting, like the things we didn't know, like when we were kids, that now we kind of take granted, like the little boys thinking that every time the girl sat out a gym class she was on her period, and I even wrote down just one of the lines, like, periods aren't contagious, like boys are stupid. But then, like, also the scene of like Taiko and the almost little sort of relationship almost that she gets into with the other classes, like the kid from the other class who plays baseball, and all the little girls teasing both of them that they're like interested in one another. It was weird. It was an interesting look on childhood and remembering those types of interactions.
yeah, it was also a weird little, because I mean, it was the epitome of I think she's in 5th grade, if I remember right.
Yes.
The epitome of a 5th grade relationship of this boy likes you, they never talk, he says 3 things to her, and they both feel like they're in love for 5 minutes, and then you never see anything about it again. And that's exactly how it works when you're that age. And so I thought that was a nice little scene there, that it was more of how everyone reacted to it, more so than anything that the two of the people actually involved did themselves.
Yeah, it's like with the girls having their period. It's the rumor. It's the gossip is bigger than anything that actually happens. It's the people spreading notes in class or whispers in the hallway. That's what really happens at that age. Nothing really happens, but everyone talks about it like it's a big thing.
Yeah. But you do get the which is definitely something I now want to put on like my dating profile of, like, do you like a sunny day or a cloudy day?
Oh, I thought you were gonna put periods aren't contagious on your profile.
No. No. But like the awkwardness of like that your first like flirtation and like trying to figure out what to say, and this is what this kid comes up with and is like, do you like a sunny day or a cloudy day? And then it's just so just waiting for an answer, and you're like, oh, this could go either really well or really poorly. And it went really well, but then he just runs off. It's like, yeah, we both like cloudy days. That's really cool. And then just runs off, all excited.
We're going to get married. Hooray.
But then that leads into one of my favorite moments in the movie, is the moment where she runs into the sky and starts swimming among the clouds. It's this amazing moment of magical realism that perfectly captures her feelings. So it's such a realistic, down-to-earth anime. But then boom, it's a little moment where it's perfectly uses magic to kind of bring us into the emotional character.
Yep.
I also thought it was fun. What the puppet show that she bonds with, that she bonds with. Oh my gosh, I just forgot his name. Even though I just said Toshio. Later
Yep.
in the movie, actually, right after the acting scene, I believe it is actually a real TV show that was on back in the '60s called. And once again, I'll probably say this wrong, but Hikori Tanjima, or Popped Up Gourd Island. And it was a popular kids show on there that they animated for this movie to, give people something they can watch and go, oh, I know what that is. And so I'm sure when they were singing the songs from it, there were people in the audiences in Japan that probably are like, I know this song. And I think that's a really cool way to add that in.
Yeah, and I liked that as the two adults were singing this song, you have the younger girl that was at the farm or whatever, and she's just kind of sitting back and just listening to these two like, I have no idea what this song is. You two are kind of weird, you know.
It's like whenever I talk about Pokemon from the '90s or like other '90s kid shows, like they have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's right. Ash is a champion for the kids now. He never got that for us.
So yeah, now talking about the adult side of this film, as they say early on that 27 is too old, you need to start settling down.
Yikes. Oh, it's rough on me.
Yeah.
Harsh truth.
Yeah. But yeah, yeah, Taiko goes out to the country to kind of escape for a little while, and she needs a break from the city life. And yeah, it was just, yeah, we got the interesting shots like on the train, and then having all of her flashbacks. But I really started to like when her and Toshio were talking in the car right after she gets picked up from the train station. It actually gave me, and I realize it actually predates my reference, it gave me an actual similar feeling to, like, the type of conversations they were having were similar types of conversations that to me took place in like the Richard Linklater Before series. Just, these two, and actually it was because of the animation being more realistic. I think helps with this is the fact that you could just have for a few minutes straight just these two characters talking in a car, and it's still being captivating and still being really interesting to watch.
Especially if you're a fan of Japanese farming techniques.
Yeah, as that's all he's talking about, of like, oh yeah, we're organic, we do this, and it's like, cool. But again, in the English dub, it's Dev Patel, so it's like, okay, I'm cool with this. It's like, Dev, just keep talking. You're awesome. So
I enjoy her growth as an adult in this movie as well, where it starts off as this is her vacation, a way for her to relax. It's the family she's staying with is actually her sister's husband's, like, not, I don't know if it's his parents or like his cousins or something like that, but she's not in any way related to them, and they've kind of taken her in. And originally it starts off as like an escape from reality of going to the country and working, and her sister doesn't know why she would choose to go work instead of go relax, because she doesn't understand that she finds this relaxing. And then the growth of her enjoying this so much, and the relationships building while she's there, into the grandma ever so bluntly being like, why don't you just marry him? And just like, yeah, no, nobody gets any choice in this. How about you just marry Toshio, and that we just call it, you can just live here forever. At which point she then has the kind of same crisis you see as a kid of second guessing herself and the way that she's thinking because it doesn't feel normal. Especially since as a kid she recalls at one point her mom literally saying she's not normal. Uh, so the fact that she's able to get picked up by Toshio at that moment is really, ends up driving where the decision's going to go here because he calms her down and she then starts daydreaming about staying with him. And that would leads to that great end scene. But I think it's a great character growth of just not like, I like it here, I'm staying. Like they actually show her um, and tie the kid's story into it of her trying to make this decision and almost just trying to talk herself out of making the right decision for herself.
Connor, any thoughts on the adult scenes?
Yeah, it's an interesting thematic journey because you're right. It's almost like she falls in love with the life. Definitely she likes Toshio and there's an attraction there, but it's not a super romantic. There's no like meet cute. There's no like like awkward kissing or whatnot. It's a movie about her loving life that she finds. This idea of this farm and sort of this regular kind of outside of the city and not having to worry about career. It's a portrait of someone. On one hand, you might see it as she's kind of giving up on like the city life. She's going back to the country into an easier life. But on the other hand, it is sort of as the story presents it, it is her kind of being open with herself and what she wants, not what maybe society or her parents expect her to have. So it is a sort of like, she, like you said, she has this second guessing, like, is this what I want? Is this what my parents want? Am I thinking what I actually want but not really wanting? It is this difficult interior journey of her deciding what's the best option for her.
I think that a lot of the stories being her not actually getting what she wanted as a child, though, was a good way to build that too. Because the majority of the stories were her literally not getting the things that she was looking for, and that's another way to bring it around to finally get what you want.
Yeah, because even in that scene where she gets slapped, like the start and why she didn't want to go to dinner with them at first was she didn't have a purse, and we got these all these scenes leading up to that of her wanting this hand-me-down purse from her older sister and the sister refusing to give it to her, and then she finally basically just throws the purse at her or at Taiko, and then Taiko is still crying and doesn't want to go, and then they start leaving without her, and then that's when she runs after them but doesn't have her shoes on.
It's such a great portrayal of childhood mentality. I think the idea that you want something, but if it doesn't go your way, you kind of like, no, I don't actually want it, but you still kind of want it. But your parents are like, okay, you say you don't want it. It really hits me how well observed the idea of how we think as a child and how we have temper tantrums and we're not really sure what we want and our parents don't understand us. It's very well written and portrayed, I think.
Oh, I was just gonna say I fully agree with that. It's especially the scenes about the purse because officially she doesn't want the purse because she wants them to buy her own. So it's this great roller coaster of, as you're watching, you just go, you're just being a child, but then you just think, well, you are a child.
Yeah.
So you can be a child.
Yep. And then we can't we touched on it earlier, but the scene at the end in the car, the flashback she's having is of this this kid that kind of was a little grungy and nobody liked and everyone was making fun of except for her. She said she was always very polite but was never nice to him either, named Abe. And he, as he was leaving school, the teacher told him to shake everyone's hand in the class, and the whole class did it, and then Abe refused to shake Taiko's hand.
I actually got a legitimate laugh from the scene when he's like leaving town with his dad, and he changes his demeanor to be the bad boy in front of her again, and his dad just hits him in the back of the head. He's like, "What are you doing? Stop that!" And I thought it was a legitimate funny moment, like a funny, cute moment of like, and it was a good realization moment because she's told that he was actually he liked her, and he didn't want to shake anybody else's hand, and he only actually wanted to shake hers, so he's doing the opposite. And that little scene just kind of proved it from her memory of like, oh, he did change everything when he was around me. Look at that.
And I love that she also, after he leaves, she tries it herself. She also hunches her back and spits just to kind of like mimic him for a bit. And like I said, it's interesting. It's this movie about thinking back in your childhood, and maybe if you talk to someone like Toshio, you can kind of reevaluate your memories or remember something you've forgotten. It's a movie about coming to terms with your memories and what you remember and what you've forgotten and how you process them and move forward.
It's a movie about saying, "Screw it, I got to go to therapy."
Yeah, in some ways, like, oh, maybe I should have talked about some of this stuff early here because, yeah, it's clearly been weighing on my conscience since 5th grade. But yeah, both of you, any of your final thoughts of the movie as a whole?
Well, I think, like I said, this is one of my favorite ones. Interesting enough, I think actually this is really interesting sort of double feature with Kiki. I think these are both movies. Kiki is about a young person sort of moving away for the first time, and this is about an older person sort of coming back and reliving her childhood. But for me, they're both very introspective movies about dealing with kind of growing up and accepting responsibility and having sometimes you feel down and you don't know what to do, but hopefully with the help of friends you can pick yourself up and keep moving forward. So I they're two of my favorite. Obviously I think Princess Mononoke and Spirit of the Way are kind of the classics of Ghibli. But these two, Kiki and Only Yesterday, really hit me because they're so introspective and meditative about real life issues, even if one of them involves a witch.
Yeah.
I am really happy that I've seen this multiple times because I find this as a multiple times through in a big gap in my life. I find this as a movie that as you get older, it's going to be more resonant to you, and you'll start to catch and see little things in you in the movie, and that's what makes this movie so good. That's why that when it came out, it was the #1 movie in Japan that year of not just animated movies but all movies. Like it's just a legitimate good introspective story, and it also something that we've said before and we'll keep saying, it continues on with the theme of Studio Ghibli that I love, and that's strong female characters. That I mean, yes, there's a love interest in this one, but it's not really. Like he's just they're courting a little bit, but it's not like a heart yearning love story. It's she's not falling in love with necessarily him. I mean, she is, but she's falling in love with what and who she's becoming and what she wants to do with her life. And even in these slice of life versions of the Studio Ghibli films like this, you still get that strong female character that really makes her own decisions, and I really love that because you don't see that in a lot of animated movies, especially around this time.
Yeah. Tashio acts less like a love interest and more like a sounding board and just someone she talks to, is comfortable talking to about all of these things, which is the basis of a good relationship. Is like, oh, communication is key. That's interesting.
That's what I've been missing.
Yeah. But then, yeah, I enjoyed this movie, probably not as much as some of the others, but yeah, it made you think a lot more. And yeah, like as it was going on, I almost started to dislike when they'd flash back to the childhood scenes, because you just remember all those mistakes that you made as a kid, and yes, you've learned from all of them, and become a better person, but it's like, oh wow, I was an idiot back then. Like, why did I do that? Why did I do this thing? Why was I so focused on, this purse or this one sort of thing when, okay, all of these other good things happened, and why was I so focused on, these few bad?
So with that, just so everyone out there listening knows, next time you hear from us, we are going to jump away from the slice of life kind of feeling that we've had for a majority of the start here. Really, since Castle in the Sky, everything has had a flair of slice of life. And now we're getting into airplane flying pigs, for we are going to be watching Porco Rosso.
Yeah, I have never seen this. I barely know what it's about, so
I've also never seen this one, so I'm very excited to watch it for the first time.
And with Porco Rosso, guys, have you heard the story that Miyazaki actually prefers the French dub of this movie? He thinks it's his favorite version of the movie because it has Jean Reno as Porco Rosso.
Oh, really?
Interesting. Yeah, okay.
The big fan.
I wonder if Michael Keaton just there was a stab in his heart when he heard that. It's like, oh, okay, I guess that's fine.
Well, I mean, Jean Reno is a fantastic actor, though. So,
yes.
You know. But yeah, Connor, anything social media wise that you wanted to plug? So just so everyone knows, we are recording this before the election, but it will come out on the 5th. So we do not know the results or anything. We are hoping for the best.
Way to destroy my joke before I even get to it.
I had to.
You didn't.
But yeah, Connor, any social media plugs and anything coming up for you?
Oh no, you can find me on Twitter at Connor_Holt. I also have a VHS Instagram account called VHS Spectacular. I'm a big VHS fan. I actually have several of these of the Ghibli films on VHS because they have different dubs and different releases. It's always fascinating. But yeah, because this is a Takahata movie, I recommend watching all of Takahata's films. And if you can, seek out some of his earlier works. He did TV work with Miyazaki back in the 70s and 80s. They're not really officially released, but you can find them on YouTube. He did Heidi, he did Anne of Green Gables, and also his first movie, Horace, Prince of the Sun. I think he's a phenomenal director with a long career that is worth checking out if you're a fan of Ghibli.
And Cheyne?
So if you're listening to this on the 5th, which is a Thursday, right? We release these on Thursdays.
Yes, we release these on Thursdays.
I will probably still be either drunk from celebration or from sadness from the election results. Go Biden. Yeah, you can listen to this podcast and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Knocked Out Entertainment.
Knocked Out Films is the easiest to search for. Yes.
Knocked Out Films will be the YouTube channel. Subscribe to that because I still would like to get us to 100. 100 subscribers, so I can
basically just look for Miyazaki and me until we get to 100 subscribers.
Yep, and then once we get to 100, I can make Kyle listen to Akira, which I'm very excited to do. And then keep a lookout. I'm having talks with a buddy of mine, Carl, about doing another podcast here, which is also anime based, but very different from Studio Ghibli. It'll be television anime, so keep a lookout for that.
Yeah, and then actually, speaking of the early Takahata stuff, in the making of documentary, Takahata actually said he actually enjoys making people laugh, but Miyazaki keeps picking these super fun titles to do, so he has to go in a different direction, which is like that one quote of like, you've made the saddest anime I've ever seen. Thank you for saying you want to make people laugh. And it's like, okay. But yeah,
He'll get his chance in his next two films, Pompoko and My Neighbor the Yabadas will both achieve that for him.
Yeah.
Like,
Hopefully, yes. But yeah, you can follow me online at Knocked Out Films and knockedoutentertainment.com. Thanks for listening.
Be good to each other.